how young a 34-year-old heart was to like get into the inspirations of somebody like Indiana Jones and get into this adventure. And I heard you in one of the interviews telling that I think I was born 100 years late to get into such a huge adventure. So, where did the motivation and inspiration come from?
Well, thank you very much for your kind question and for the research you've done as well. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. When I was a child, I would run around in the forest and I would pretend that I would be Robin Hood or Mowgli or Indiana Jones. And as I grew older, I would read about the proper adventurers, the first to go to the North Pole, the first to go to the South Pole, and so on. And I would slowly realize that all the great adventures had been done with, that there was nothing left on this planet for the rest of us. And they'd gone to space 550 times already. They'd been on top of Mount Everest more than 6,000 times. I mean, what's left for the rest of us? And back in 2013, my father, he sent me an email. And I followed a link and I was reading about people who had gone to every country in the world, something which has also been done several times. But by reading this, I realized that no one had accomplished going to every country in the world completely without flying. And there was nothing in the books that said that I was going to pack my bag and run into the world and try to accomplish this immediately, but it slowly grew on me. And within the span of 10 months, I actually did pack my bag and leave.
Great to hear that. Like, but I've heard of a person like Hughes doing it earlier. So how your journey was different from his?
Yeah, well, there are three things that I can say that he cannot say. I can say that I've spent more than 24 hours in every country. I can say that between leaving home and reaching every country, I never flew at any point.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that I did it all in one unbroken journey. So the differences would be that Graham, on some accounts, just spent a few seconds or a few minutes across the borders, that he would fly several times to go on holiday or be with family or maybe even chase visas, and that he would return home several times during his journey. So I actually did meet Graham Hughes, and I think he's
Okay.
an absolutely amazing adventurer. He has a great personality. He's funny, he's clever, he's very intelligent. I really, really like him. But in the context of our projects are two different projects.
Okay. And like, where did this name, Once Upon a Saga, came from? Like, what's the whole story behind this name? And one more thing, I want to ask, uh, like, did you have a picture in your mind of going to 203 countries, or how contrary was your journey to the situations you have built earlier in your mind?
Okay. Well, first of all, where the name came from. I'm glad you asked me that question.
Hmm.
So I brought some friends on board to help me start the project, and I call us the project group. And we were not settled on a name yet. And then one day I came up with the idea, Once Upon a. And then we didn't know what it was going to be. Once upon a what? So it could be once upon a hat, once upon a journey, once upon a whatever, but once upon a. And we all seem to agree on that. And the once upon a came because Denmark is for me at least, a fairy tale kind of country. We had Hans Christian Andersen was born in Denmark and wrote stories, and the stories would often start with once upon a time there was a princess and a dragon and so on. And also we are a kingdom, so we have princes and we have princesses and so on. So it's a little bit fairy tale about my country. Once upon a was a good beginning. Then the saga point plays heritage to the Vikings. When the Vikings, they would travel into the world, then the most prominent ones that returned, they would have their stories written down. And a saga would be a story of adventure and exploration. And yeah, so Once Upon a Saga is the project name. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
How contrary the journey like was an actual than the journey you had made in your own mind.
You mean how it played out compared to my
Yes,
plan?
yes.
Well, I thought I would be able to do it in less than 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I thought I could do it in 3.5 years if I went a little bit quick about it. But in reality, it was far more demanding than I ever imagined it would be. It got more and more complex as time passed on. Also, I wanted to put more and more content into the project. So I wanted to be blogging about the countries and sharing my experiences with people. I was meeting with the Red Cross globally. My wife came out to visit me many times around the world. I was doing speaking engagements and interviews, and all of this took extra time. And then we had a global pandemic which struck, and I happened to be in a part of the world that which was very strict about it. So I ended up being in Hong Kong for 2 years before I could finally continue, still with many restrictions in terms of getting into future countries and getting on board ships. So it was very, very different from what I imagined when I left home.
Okay. So like, first of all, many congratulations to you for completing your journey this year. You
Thank
did
you.
it on like 23rd of May. You completed it in Maldives.
Well, so this is an interesting topic because I asked my online following, I said, when is the project actually finished? Is it when I reach the final country, Maldives, or is it when I get back home to Denmark?
Mhm.
And someone very clever said that it would be successful when I reached the Maldives, but it would be completed when I reached home.
Okay. So did you like, first of all, when you started it, did the date was in your mind, like why it was like October 13th or October 10th when you started in 2013? Something
Right.
special about that day?
Well, not in particular, nothing auspicious or anything like that. But it was a date that was easy to remember. My wife and I were practicing, we were training because we were going to enter a marathon in Berlin. And this marathon race was going to be in September. So we went to Berlin and we ran the marathon. And once I completed the marathon, my legs were tired and my body was tired. And I knew this was going to be the case. So I didn't want to leave the next day. So I was looking for a date somewhere, maybe a couple of weeks after that. And I happened to stumble upon the date, the 10th of the 10th. And then I set it to 10:10 a.m. So I would have 10:10:10:10. And I thought
Oh,
that was a really
interesting,
nice day.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so being held at like gunshots, global
Yes.
pandemic happening, many like you would have encountered wild animals being treated with cerebral malaria, countless other things like you're sailing on a ship or a boat which is about to sink. How did you
Yes.
keep that adrenaline like rush into you, keep gushing and like to keep till the end of the journey? How did you made it through?
It's a really good question. Overall, I think that anything worthwhile in life is worthwhile fighting for.
Mm,
So if that is you want to finish your education or you want to find a job or you want to save money or if there's anything you want in life, then you cannot give up when it gets hard. There's an old expression, a popular American expression, I guess, which is that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And you really have to find that strength within yourself and push forward. If you want to learn a new language, then you cannot give up because your head starts hurting after 2 or 3 days and you
it
cannot
does,
remember
it
the
does.
words. You have to keep working at it, you know? So we want to learn how to play an instrument, then you cannot stop after a few days because you feel you're no good. You have to keep for months or years even to master anything. So I think that's where the strength came from, just as a general idea about that this is something I truly wanted. I didn't want to falter. I didn't want to quit anywhere. I wanted to complete it. I believed that I could be successful, even though it was very painful sometimes, even though it was dangerous sometimes. But if you look in the big picture, there are so many nice stories and there are so many nice people that I've met all around the world, and there are fantastic countries all around the world. And it's been a huge education for me to go to every country in the world in this way. So often we might be drawn towards the bad, the cerebral malaria, or being at gunpoint, or maybe the global pandemic or something else. But we also have to remember all the kindness that we are shown in life and all the homes I've been invited into, the meals I've had, and the beautiful sunsets that I've seen. And I mean, there's a lot of good in the world, and we have a tendency to forget about it.
Totally true. And like I think uh all these instances about like being like to be held at gunpoint, all those like arduous and dangerous situations, that what like makes a journey an adventure. And
That's
that's
true.
like what
That
makes
is
it much
true.
more beautiful.
I agree.
And like it was about you would have completed 90% of your journey and you were still to go to complete that 10% before you got caught in that pandemic.
Yes.
To come to the point of 90 is like
Yes.
much more easier to get from 90 to 100. It like one of my mentors told me that. And like, could you tell us something about like any anecdotes which you wanted to share about how arduous your journey was?
Well, whoa, which one should I pick for you? Okay, so the third last country that I was meant to go to was Tuvalu. So I was right at the end, only three
Mm-hmm.
countries. And Tuvalu is a beautiful island nation in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very small population of only 11,000 people. So, I mean, can you imagine that when you come from India with the greatest population on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
this one is maybe the smallest population on the planet. It's far into the Pacific, and my launch point was Fiji. So I was in Fiji trying to get a ticket. I finally got a ticket. Then they promised that the ferry would come and they would pick me and the other passengers on a 5-day voyage to go to Tuvalu. But in reality, we had to wait an additional 16 days of
Okay.
delay before this ferry came. Then finally the ferry came, then halfway on its way to Tuvalu, the engine broke down. So then we had to wait for them to fix the engine. Then when the engine was up and running again, we could continue. We managed all the way to Tuvalu. Then I had a return ticket. So I asked, okay, when can I return? And they say, not until after 1 month. I said, a month? What am I going to do here for a month? They said, well, enjoy. People are nice. Then I waited for a month. Then what happened was that all the government vessels, they broke down, so they were not operational. So the government chose to return all the students and all the foreign workers by airplane. So they gave them all tickets and they flew them back to Fiji. But of course, I couldn't fly because of the project. So now I was stuck in Tuvalu, and the government wasn't going to send a vessel just for me. So eventually the government said, okay, we have a ship which needs to go to shipyard. There's a hole in the bottom of the ship and it's taking water in from the shaft. This one needs to go to dry dock in Fiji, and you can join this one. So I come on board the ship. They clear me with customs and immigration. I'm living on the ship. The ship is absolutely covered and crawling with cockroaches. Everywhere you see, when you sit down, you have cockroaches crawling on your body. When you go to sleep, you feel them on your face. If you put down your toothbrush, you can see them crawling around on your toothbrush. Everywhere there are cockroaches. So they stamped me out of Tuvalu, and I'm ready to go with this ship. The next morning I wake up, I'm still in Tuvalu, and the next morning, and the next morning, and for the next month even, I was still in Tuvalu. So now 2 months in Tuvalu. Meanwhile, I have a ship in Fiji that I need to get to so I can connect and continue on my way to Singapore. So time is running out. Then by a strike of luck, I overhear a radio conversation, and this is between a tugboat captain and an agent. And I run to the agent and I ask for coming on board the tugboat, and we work it out with the captain, and I jump from one ship to the other ship, and I head across 4 days back to Fiji, and I make it back. And this was just one country.
Crazy experience. Like, I feel a whole years of movies and years of movies could go on capturing your experiences. And I've seen a small clip of yours, cockroaches crawling over a toothbrush in the documentary,
Yes.
which is gonna come the next year. Much
Yes,
excited to
next
see
year we
that.
have the documentary out, a book, a documentary, and I'm doing speaking engagements as well. So a lot
Yes.
of good stuff is
Mhm.
happening next year.
I'm too much excited for the book and the documentary.
Thank you
I've
so
got the
much.
speaking right here.
The book will be written in English, so I hope you will enjoy it.
Sure, sure. Like, I'll try to like get more and more viewers for it. I hope that it's gonna be so enthralling.
Oh, thank
Like,
you.
you're traveling in 203 countries, so it means like diverse cultures, diverse languages, diverse ideologies,
Yeah,
perspectives, races, colors, and not 203, but thousands and thousands of. Because
yes,
even in a country like ours, in India, you change the state, the language changes. You have so
yes,
many barriers over there. So
yes.
how did you navigate through this language barrier?
Well, for the most part, it wasn't all that complicated because a large part of the world speaks English or sometimes some broken English. So it has. I come from Denmark, and in my country
Mhm.
we speak Danish, and we Danish is not spoken anywhere else around the world, so it's not helpful. But I speak English, and that has been tremendously helpful. Unfortunately, sometimes you're in a country where there aren't many English speakers, and the one person you want to speak to, who's maybe a farmer or an old woman selling tea, or They do not speak English. And then you have someone else who comes in and tries to help and wants to translate or wants to speak to you. And you end up speaking to maybe another nice person, but not the person you wanted to speak to because of the language barrier. So it can be like that sometimes. But generally, you can make do with English. I speak German as well. This has been helpful. I speak a little bit of French. I speak a little bit of Spanish, enough to get by. This has been helpful. I speak a little bit of Arabic also, which has been helpful in some cases. The only place where language barrier was a huge issue were in some of the former Soviet Union countries in Central America, Central Asia, in Central Asia. So like in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they speak their local language, and then their international language is Russian instead of English. So when they cannot make do with their own language, they will switch to Russian, and I speak neither. So then it would be complicated sometimes.
So how did you like get through those countries then?
Oh, well, you can always find a way. And in any case, I think body language should have some merit. So if you want to say that you're sleepy, you can do like this. If you're hungry, you do like this. If you want chicken, you can do like this.
Like I got a person to interview a few days back. Even he did a like world expedition on foot. He walked all the way from India to America. And he told me that I didn't knew English either. I just knew Hindi, and that was not gonna work. But there is something like the language of love which communicates better than anything. And it does. I see it like walking through. That's fine. The language barrier is fine, but then there are cultural barriers. How did you like learn through those cultural barriers, like getting into more and more, like learning about ideologies, learning about philosophies, new religions, spirituality coming up in a country like India? So what imprints did they leave?
Well, I'm a novice, right? So when I come from a small country like Denmark and I arrive in a huge country like India, I will know that there's no way that within a few weeks I will understand the full spectrum or the culture or the history of such a country, right? What I can do is I can do a little bit of research before arriving so I understand some things. And in addition to that, I keep my eyes and my ears open. So when I arrive, I see how things are done. For instance, if I want to go and visit a temple and I see that everyone is taking off their footwear, then of course I will take my footwear off before I go in. If I see that the men that walk into the temple, they take off their shirt before going in, then of course I will take off my hat and I'll take off my shirt so I don't offend anyone. If nobody is taking any photos, then I will also not take any photos because there's a reason why people are not taking photos. If I can see people are taking photos everywhere, then I don't feel shy about taking photos. So you can sort of observe your way through life like that. Then in terms of food, I'm always happy to try something new if it looks good and it smells good and if it's offered to me, and then I'll try it. I'll have some new experience. Some countries in the world, when you want to go and greet somebody, if you go into a room, you should be looking for the oldest man in the room. And that's the first person you should greet culturally. In other countries, you can just greet the first person who you meet when you come through the door. When I give a business card, in my country, you can basically just hand it with one hand, or you can almost throw it at someone. In many other countries, you take with two hands and you politely give it like this. So you can observe these things and you can learn as you go.
So it's like remove your slippers, remove your shirt, or you expelled or get into a trouble. So like, were there any cultural imprints on you which like kept you through like till the moment, and which you cherish, that you learned through?
I think there's a cultural gesture which I found especially in Central Asia, which in general is that when you greet someone, you put your right hand to your heart and then you nod kindly with your head. I think that makes it more of a personal greeting, that you're sort of saying hello with your heart to someone. I really enjoy that.
Okay. Like either joining your hands like this or keeping it like that. It's a normal ritual which is like communicated through Asia. From heart to heart connections.
When I meet people today, I still do this because I think it's very nice.
It's very heartily to know.
Yeah.
Okay, like many things going on, and you have stepped on the land of Palestine. You have stepped on the land of Israel. You have went to countries like Ukraine and Russia.
Yes.
And watching a person like you, can I call you a global citizen then?
I hope so. I hope you can. I think it would be a
I want to. I want to call you a global citizen, promoting peace and cultural harmony all over the world. So
Yeah.
when you see situations like war coming up between such countries,
Hmm.
countries like Israel, Palestine fighting, countries like Ukraine and Russia fighting, countries like Korea, like
Yeah.
what things your mind comes up? Like, do you get emotional watching these things?
I do. I do. I get frustrated and I get worried and sometimes I get upset as well.
Mhm.
I have been to these countries. I cherish these countries. On both sides, if it's in Ukraine or if it's in Russia, we're talking about people. We're talking about people who like to do TikTok dances, and they go to school and they go to work, and they have parents and or they have children, and everyday life they enjoy sports and good food and music and so on both sides. I mean, in general, there's no reason for these conflicts, you know, that someone has some idea about something that belongs to one person or something that belongs to another person, or some ideology is correct and the other ideology is wrong. It's proven across this world that we can live together in spite of our differences. You know, there's so many places. If you look at religion, there are so many places in the world where you have Christians and Muslims and Hindus living together and going to school together and trading at marketplaces together and walking the streets together and eating at the same restaurants. It's really not an issue. So I don't always understand why it has to be an issue in some parts of the world. Plus, I don't believe that eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, and then what is the next thing? Tooth for a tooth, and then another tooth and another tooth, and then your children's tooth and your neighbor's tooth. And I mean, where does it end with all the fighting?
Mm,
It's very, very sad, and I worry for my friends and the people that I met around the world.
mm,
When I hear about this happening in Israel or in Palestine, I know people in Palestine, I know people in
mm.
Israel, I know people in Russia, I know people in Ukraine. I'm worried that some harm might come to them or some of them, someone that they love. So it is very much on my mind.
It saddens me too. Like, do you talk to friends over there now?
Sorry?
Do you have conversations, like recent
Yes,
conversations with?
yes, yes, I do. We live in a modern world, and we have internet, and you can send a text message in a matter of seconds. So I do send messages to check in on my friends and people that I know, and I'm worried when I don't get an answer.
Hmm. Like it's completely depressing then. There needs to be done something. And
Yeah.
you as a traveler have experienced certain like bureaucratic operations you could have. You would have been like shaped by different sorts of governments. You too have witnessed that. There are lots and lots of other things like governance. There's too much of like discrimination going all around. There's bureaucracy and international relation politics and a lot of these things. So how did you encounter like political oppression during your travel?
Well, I mean, it's very clear that we're not living in a perfect world, and that life can be very hard many places in the world. But in the big picture, it hasn't affected me as a traveler, as someone who passed through a country. I think that life gets a lot harder when you settle down and you try to start a business or keep a job, or you need to go through the paperwork of getting your children to school or
Mhm.
getting a driver's license or something else. I've dealt with a great deal of the bureaucracy of many countries around the world in trying to get invitation letters or get permissions to cross into certain regions, and certainly in getting the visas. So sometimes I feel it to some degree this way through, or through that venue. But overall, if a country has poor leadership, then I might not feel it directly. Sometimes you can see it in the landscape. You can see that the schools could be better, the educational system could be better, that the infrastructure could be better. You could see that the healthcare system could be better, and that the means and how do you say, the resources of a country are not being directed to where they should be going. Um,
Mhm.
but in the big picture, it's not something that affects me Other than I can feel that it's a shame and for the people who live there. And once I leave the country, they're still left behind and they still have to deal with it.
They have to. They're like there are many cases of social injustice, great poverty. Like we see war healings. So
Yes, that's
there's
true.
a great need to work on these certain things. And how did this Danish travel celebrity in his young days got nurtured through books and ideas and movies? Like, could you suggest some
Um, in terms of which books I find inspiring, or
people, books, movies? Like any great adventurers, Columbus, Bear Grylls you found like interesting and to make you go in such a trail.
I'd say in the mainstream media, then it would be Indiana Jones made me very curious about going on adventure, and so did Robin Hood, and so did Ivanhoe. In terms of books, I'm very fond of a book called Arabia Felix, which is an expedition that took place more than maybe around 400 years ago, where they went to explore what we today call Yemen. It's an
Mm.
extraordinary book. I'm also very intrigued with Shackleton's adventure to the South Pole. So there's a book called Endurance, which was written by Alfred Lansing. And that's one of my favorite books. And it's just packed to the brim with endurance is a good name for the book because that's really what it covers, but also leadership and adventure for sure. In terms of travelers, my favorite traveler of all time is Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta which is not his name as
Mm.
such, because when you come from my part of the world, I find it very hard to pronounce his full name, but he has an Arabic name, which is very, very long. And Ibn Battuta just means son of Battuta. But if you look him up, Ibn Battuta, he was a traveler from 800 years ago who would he came from Morocco, and he went on his Hajj journey to go to Mecca. And then he just found that he really enjoyed traveling so much that he was gone for 4 years. Then after 4 years, he came back home and he decided, no, he hadn't had enough. So he went out and then he traveled for another 25 years. And I think for maybe 700 years or more, he was the most traveled man on this planet. He went, for sure, he went to India. He might have gone to China as well. He went up and down the African coasts. He's such an inspiring traveler.
It's really wonderful to see your side of story, but the adventure side of my began when in my school I got a book called Around the World in this and like this and
In
this
80
days,
days. Yeah.
and I didn't read that book, but the title was so much like it coerced me so much that I found it interesting. And recently I watched the movie and I found
Yeah.
it very interesting. The movie was Into the Wild. You would have
Ah,
surely
yeah.
heard about it. And wonderful movie. Who want to take up something like adventure in their going up lives. So what's next, Thor? New
Well,
adventures coming up?
yeah, I have a few adventures coming up. I've been invited to go and visit some regions and countries I've already been to. I'm setting up a life with my wife right now, so that's a big adventure, trying to make things work and build for the future. We have the documentary next year, we have the book next year, and I'm going on a speaking tour in Denmark next year. So all of that is coming up within my life. I hope to continue traveling. I would like to go to Alaska. I've never been there before. I'd like to go to Easter Island. I'd like to go to Galapagos Island. I'd like to go to Antarctica. So I'm sure I have a lot of good things coming ahead. But right now I'm focusing on family and getting ready for 2024.
I can see a lot of exciting, like thrilling in you. A lot of work to do the next year. Things coming up on the way. And just tell me whenever you come to India, I would surely like uh, find it exciting to take many good treks over there in Dharamshala in the Himalayas. It's great to
Thank
it's
you.
like wonderful to trek over there in the snowy
Thank
mountains, being a little ridiculed by wild bears. You're always feared by them. But your name also had that sort of bear element in that, lightning and bear. So
Yes,
hope not to get feared about it. And
right.
any sort of teaching you would like to leave for any like youngsters watching this out who want to go on such wonderful expeditions in the future?
Yes, there are two things I would like to say. First of all, in my experience with people all around the world, I find it's like playing the opposite lottery. So a reverse kind of lottery where you're winning all the time. It's pretty much everyone that you meet anywhere you go, if it's in a bus or at a station or a marketplace or a restaurant or on the street, they are not going to try to harm you. They are people that are going to be kind and helpful. And if you're lucky, they'll be funny as well. It's not to say that there are no bad people in the world, because there are, but overall, you're winning all the time when you talk and when you meet with people. The other thing I would like to say is that as soon as you leave your home, you become a guest, and you should always be conscious about being a guest. Be aware that you're a guest. So you should be on your best behavior. You should keep your eyes and your ears open. You should observe as much as possible. You should try not to be opinionated. You should really just try to take in all the experience and all the new culture and everything that you're learning as you venture into the world. And this doesn't have to be across global borders. This can be going from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. It can be going to a different village or a different town or a different city or a different state. But you should always be aware that as soon as you leave home, you become a guest and you become an ambassador for your own home. And people might not know anybody else. So if you come from India and you visit Denmark, you could be the first Indian that some people they meet. And if you're rude or if you're short-tempered, then people are going to think that all Indian people are rude and short-tempered, and that would be wrong. So you should always be on your best behavior. And as I traveled as a Danish person throughout the world, I tried to be on my best behavior so that if I'm the first Danish person that anyone meets, then they will have a good memory about that.
Wonderful to hear that. Like, and traveling is something, it's like challenging your own prejudices, which you have formed throughout the years. And breaking your own prejudices means like getting deeper into the self, knowing who you really are. Because whenever you go somewhere, a new area, first of all, you need to be human. Then, like, after that, you are a Danish person or an Indian or a American. But first of all, you need to behave like those people are behaving, right, in
Well,
that country.
I
So,
agree.
like, I totally agree with all what you said. It was really wonderful to see you over, like, catching up in this interview. I can see that adventure is thrilling up in me, and I can find that adrenaline boost getting in my veins to go up somewhere and do this expeditions like you in my journey forward. So, really grateful
Happy
to
to
you
hear
for
that.
coming up here.
My pleasure. Thank you